We have been solving quadratics where we factor, and there have been a few in our homework where we could not factor, and that's okay. There's going to be problems that do not factor, so we need another way to solve quadratics. So that's what we're going to look at today. I'm going to start this problem just like I would, where I'm getting one side equal to 0. So I have 2x squared minus 4x minus 3. So you may ask yourself what multiplies to give you negative 6 and adds to give you negative 4. And you're over here, and the closest you could get would be negative 5. So this does not factor. So we need to have a different way to solve, and we can do that by the quadratic formula. It'll work for every single quadratic that we have. So if you are a student that likes to use the same approach with everything, quadratic formula is perfect for you. The only thing is factoring many times can be faster. So if you know how to factor, it's always very beneficial. So let's look at the quadratic formula. I learned it to pop goes the weasel. Not really, but later in life I did. So how the quadratic formula goes, x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we'll do this in class, but x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, clearly you have to know what a, b, and c represent. And so a is just your number in front of the quadratic term. So in this case it's 2. B is your number in front of your linear term. And in this case it's negative 4. And c is just your constant. And in this case it's negative 3. Notice you always want to include the sign with your a, b, and c. Now we're just going to plug in our a, b, and c to the formula. So before I usually start, I will set up parentheses, because anytime we're substituting, you want to plug in parentheses. So x is equal to negative parentheses plus or minus the square root of parentheses squared minus 4 parentheses parentheses all over 2 parentheses. Now then I'm going to plug in my values. So my b, remember, is negative 4. So right here I'm just plugging in that b. So I have a negative b. So the opposite of a negative 4 is actually a positive 4. And then I have another b squared, so I need to square all of b. So in that case, that would be 16, because a negative 4 times negative 4. That's why the parentheses are critical. If you're using your calculator, you need to make sure that you have that negative 4 in parentheses before you square it. Minus 4a. So my a, I'm going to have an a here and all over 2a. And then I'm going to go ahead and plug in my c, minus 4ac. So I have x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now I'm going to simplify. So I started. The opposite of negative 4 is positive 4. Plus or minus, when I square that negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. Now notice here I'm going to have a negative 4 times 2 times a negative 3. That's going to give me a positive 24 all over 4. Now I just need to simplify. So I've got 4 plus or minus, this is going to be the square root of 40. And all I did was add 16 and 24 together. All over 4. Well, as a review, do we remember how we simplify the square root of 40? Back from chapter 11, we either looked at perfect square numbers or we did prime factorization. So this will break down into 2 times 2 times 2 times 5 if you're doing prime factorization. You have to have a pair in order to bring 1 out. That's really kind of the definition of what a square root is. So square root of 40 simplifies to 2 root 10. So we're going to write this x is equal to 4 plus or minus 2 root 10 all over 4. Now, this is where I'm going to go ahead and show you where my two solutions come in. So I've got 4 plus 2 root 10 all over 4, and I have 4 minus 2 root 10 all over 4. Now, when you're first learning, this is really important, just that you can see the two different solutions. But we can simplify this even further because notice these have, the numerator has a 2 in common. When you look at this 4 and this 2, we could actually factor out a 2. And so typically how we write that is we're going to factor out a 2. And so this is going to be 2 plus 1 root 10 all over 4. And the reason we do that is because now we can actually simplify when it's a monomial over a monomial, because 2/4 is the same as 1/2. And then of course your other solution will do the same thing where you can factor out a 2 and it'll be 2 minus, you don't have to have that 1 right there, you could just write it root 10 because it's understood that it's there. And then you will reduce that 2/4 to 1/2. So let's see if I can move this all up at one time. You're going to have 2 plus root 10 all over 2 and 2 minus root 10 all over 2. Another way you could write that, just so that you know, you could go kind of further. 2 divided by 2 plus root 10 divided by 2 is the same as 1 plus root 10 over 2. So just know there's a few different ways that you could actually reduce that. And then of course this one could also be written 1 minus root 10 over 2. So depending on how your teacher likes it, both solutions are simplified and appropriate.